Welcome to C2C, everyone. Today, a great guest, great company, mission-driven company, unusual, exciting mission, but I'm not going to tell that story. Our guest is. So welcome Rod Johnson, who is co-founder of a company called BLK Bold.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today, Gary. Nice to meet you, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about my journey and hopefully add some value to your listeners.
Absolutely. So tell our listeners your background story. My understanding is you've just passed the 5-year mark with your company, so congrats on that. Tell our listeners what inspired you to do this, what your mission is, what makes your company unique.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we just surpassed that proverbial mile marker of 5 years, and we're really, really excited about that. But it took a lot to get here from us launching back in 2018. And, that was really the culmination of my business partner and I really just being unfulfilled in a variety of ways. We were career professionals, working in the profit and nonprofit spaces. Myself as a fundraiser for academic and healthcare institutions, and Pernell, my business partner, working for Fortune 50 companies and building small business brands, essentially. So we had these skill sets, and we're working and satisfied with our careers, but just weren't satisfied with the end result of our efforts. And one day, Pernell gave me a call and he asked the question if I drank coffee. And at the time, I didn't drink coffee. And he went on to tell me about this idea that he had and how that could be a gumbo of a lot of our interests. And one conversation led to the other, and we found ourselves applying for an LLC and then ultimately launching our online business June 1st of 2018.
That's terrific. And you're a unique company. You as a small, innovative company, you've had some really, really neat partnerships. The NBA, Marvel Comics, others. Tell us about that and how you managed to swing those partnerships.
Well, to the point that you made, it starts with one, having a quality product. So at our source, at our core, we're a coffee roastery located in Des Moines, Iowa. But what differentiates us from others in the coffee industry is the fact that we are built upon social impact. And social impact as defined by us, giving back to organizations that support youth in need. Pernell and myself were at one point classified as youth in need. And as we were able to surpass expectations of our demographic, we wanted to make sure that we served as a resource to others who may not necessarily be motivated or may not see themselves in a position outside of what's in front of them. And larger corporations like the NBA, Ben & Jerry's, and Marvel share in those sentiments of being a resource and being a model for youth in need. And so again, in our maturation, we've been fortunate enough to align with those businesses that have shared value and really amplify what we're trying to do for youth in need by way of coffee.
That's great. And, tell us about the community you serve. Tell us about youth in need. Tell our listeners some of the specifics of how you make that actionable.
Yeah, well, we're coffee for all, right? I mean, we're a nationally distributed brand by way of our retail partners, Target, Albertsons, Walgreens. But again, we're using our 5% of our gross profits to support 14 organizations across America that again are predicated on advancing the life skills of youth in need. Here in Des Moines, Iowa, which is where we're based, we support By Degrees Foundation, and it's an amazing organization that that complements the public school system, if you will, by adding auxiliary programming, in-school counselors, and just other resources so that students have a more well-rounded experience, the well-rounded K through 12 experience. There are also other organizations that we support in metropolitan areas like Chicago and New York that are focused on eradicating food insecurity, right? When we think about who was most at risk or who suffered the most when schools shut down, it was kids who rely on the free lunch, free and reduced lunch at school. And so, while we were or are unable at this point to solve that issue, we're at least pouring into the organizations that are teaching kids how to grow their own food, the importance of urban farming, the importance of healthy life choices. Those organizations, like I said, in Chicago and in New York are Urban Growers Collective, as well as City Growers. So again, our focus as an organization is to not have one singular focus, but really to pour into the organizations that are servicing youth in need as a whole.
So you're in a crowded category. Beverages is
very crowded.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Coffee's crowded, tea's crowded. How do you stand out?
I would say one, again, being a social impact company, that's something that is a huge differentiator for us. Two, it's to be innovative. So when you think about our product portfolio, it spans across however people consume coffee outside of a coffee shop. So we have our core, our base, which is our bagged coffee. You have your beans and your ground coffee. But last summer, we partnered with, we took a couple of different steps in some different directions. One was to release our individual cold brew cans. So cold brew is the fastest growing segment in coffee, and we have Gen Z to thank for that. They love their energy and they love convenience. So cold brew is something that checks off a lot of boxes for them. And last summer we released 4 flavors of cold brew that not only are highly caffeinated, but they're also low in calorie intake. And so when you compare them to a lot of sugary energy drinks out there, this is a healthy alternative that consumers can consider. So that's one innovative product that we were able to bring to market. And then another that isn't necessarily innovative on the surface, but if you peel back a few layers, you'll see why we did it. And that's the release of our Keurig K-Cup pods. Now, K-Cups dominate the single serve coffee industry. I think that they account for like 60-70% of all market share, single serve market share, that is. But they don't have a ton of specialty coffee brands in their portfolio. What do I mean by specialty coffee? Similar to wine, coffee is graded on a scale from 1 to 100 by the Specialty Coffee Association. A bunch of smart people get in a room, they sit around at a table, they bring up their grading rubric, and they taste the coffee, similar to like a sommelier in wine. And they'll grade it based on its aroma, based on what it tastes like at different boiling points or different brewing points, if you will. And from there, it's then scored, again, 1 to 100. Anything that receives a score from 80 to 100 is deemed specialty coffee. And this is what you typically find in coffee shops, right? Your more niche, your more nuanced coffee shops, if you will. And I say all that to say that's the type of coffee that we source. Our formal name is Black and Bold Specialty Beverages. And the fact that we are now taking that very niche product, specialty coffee, and then pairing it with the largest single serve avenue, that's another way to bring more people into our ecosystem, who may be a bit afraid of traditional brewing methods. You can now press a button and still get coffee house quality coffee at your home, essentially. So, being innovative in those regards help us to stand out among the very mature industry that is coffee.
So I just learned something. I had no idea that it was like a wine weight rating for coffee, 0 to 100. I did not know that. So now I got to ask a follow-up question, which is, if you buy wine, not always, but frequently you will see, this scored a 91 or this scored a
Yeah.
93. That's why you ought to buy it. I don't recall ever seeing that on coffee. Is that done in the industry or?
It's not really prevalent. I mean, there may be a few specialty coffee brands that do that, and maybe even some coffee shops that will boast the type of coffee that they have available, but it's not something that is marketed because a lot of people don't know about it, right? They're like, what does this score of 91 mean? It's not, there has to be some level of education to the consumer so that that badge can then have some credibility. But if you are interested, the information is out there. The Specialty Coffee Association has resources upon resources and years of data that you can look into to find out where your preference, where that lies on the specialty coffee spectrum.
Would you ever think about putting it on your label? This is already.
It's something that we have considered.
Yeah.
It is something that we have considered. Again, there's a level of education that we need to deploy first, but it's in our back pocket.
Yeah, cool. So, I saw some of your bags of coffee were branded with, Marvel Comics or the NBA. And I understand maybe you've branded some things with keto as well. Is that true?
Yeah, our keto friendly cold brews, that is, right. So they have zero sugar. There's a naturally occurring sugar, allulose, that we use to sweeten it, but everything else is just the natural flavor of our coffee. And again, as we are positioning our cold brew as an alternative for sugary energy drinks, that's something that we think is going to bold in our favor.
Mm-hmm. And with all the innovation you've done in the last 5 years, how do you and your team, Rod, how do you stay motivated to keep innovating? What drives you to keep coming up with the next thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's fun some days, right? I mean, when you get big wins like our licensing agreements with Marvel and the NBA, that's something that's extremely gratifying. When you get a chance to partner with the likes of a Ben and Jerry's, the premier B Corp, that's also a huge validator. So it's having those wins under our belt. That gives us more fuel in our tank, but really it's what we're doing this for. It's so that we can be a vehicle, be a resource for those who otherwise just need a boost, right? There are a ton of talented people that are just in unfortunate circumstances. And if we're able to spark the fire in them for them to, realize their full potential by way of a coffee, that's a track that we want to continue, and a path that we want to continue to forge down.
And speaking of that, if I have it right, the math is impressive. I know of companies who say we give 1% of our net profits to charitable good causes, but you're giving not just 5%, you're giving 5% of revenue to these causes.
Yeah, of top line, right? I mean, so before we pay ourselves.
I don't know anybody else who does that. Do you know anybody else who does 5% of top line?
I'm not certain, right? So maybe we're onto something, or maybe we're
you're super good people. You're just super good people.
That's really what it is. Thank you for that. I receive that and I appreciate that. That kudos is very validating, but that just feels like the right thing for us to do.
Mm-hmm.
We started this business with the intent to give back. My business partner and I grew up in Gary, Indiana, right? And I don't know if your listenership is familiar with the area, but at one point it was the epicenter of the steel industry for America. Just that Indiana, Northwest Indiana, Pennsylvania, Ohio, that area. But then when those jobs are shipped overseas, you leave those communities to fend for themselves and to seek alternative means of survival. And that led Gary to really be the poster child of those efforts, if you will. And it's not that people don't desire better; it's just that they don't have proximity to it, so to speak. And so again, if I could use what I've learned to give back to the community that I owe so much, to my personality, to my perseverance, just to my whole ethos, then that's something that I want to continue to do.
Yeah. How'd you get to Des Moines to have the business based there? I'm just curious.
Oh gosh,
it's not the epicenter of the coffee business, right?
Not at all. You don't think about coffee and Des Moines; those don't go hand in hand. No, Des Moines and Iowa at large is known for corn. In fact, my house is surrounded by a cornfield. Prior to living in Des Moines, I lived in California. My goal after college was to avoid the snow at all costs. So I moved to California, but my business partner had other plans for us, I guess. He met his wife, who is originally from Des Moines, and after they decided to grow their family, they moved to where they had resources, and simultaneously we were building the business. I was responsible in California for all things digital. So, managing our social media, email, paid ads, et cetera, while Pernell really manned the operations from his garage. And once we outgrew the garage, he gave me a call and said, "Hey man, do you want to trade those palm trees for cornfields?" That's a big ask, my friend. But really, it was necessary, and I'm grateful because I think a lot of opportunities have manifest themselves just by us being in close proximity. So I have him to blame for us being in Des Moines, but that hasn't stopped us from having national accessibility.
It's a great American success story, the startup in the garage. So it was a garage.
It 1000% was a garage. You can add our picture to the likes of the Amazon with Jeff Bezos and everybody else who started in the garage. Funny story about that, or about this. We had to. It's a garage, right? And we needed to do what we needed to do in order to make it a roastery. So we cut a hole in his garage so that we can have the exhaust go out. And we're self-taught roasters and self-taught business people. And during those earlier days when we were roasting coffee, we weren't doing it right. There was so much smoke emitting from the garage that the neighbors called the fire department, thinking that the house was on fire. We still have that first bag of beans. It's as black as your shirt, as a reminder of what not to roast coffee.
When they called the fire department, they must have said, "This house is on fire, but it smells great."
Yeah, I don't know if it smelled so great, Gary. Those beans were crispy. Okay.
Oh. So Rod, since so many of our listeners are food CPG innovators, and they work on the bench, they work, as food scientists, they work as creators. What can you share about a typical, concept to creation to store shelf situation with coffee? When you have a new idea, without divulging any trade secrets, what is the process for you and your team?
Yeah, it really starts from the source, and ensuring that that the beans have some distinction to them, if you will. So coffee is a very absorbent plant, and it takes on the characteristics of what's grown in close proximity. So you'll see often on coffee bags or specialty coffee bags, and it'll read, caramel, toffee, and nutty flavor. It's not that there were additives, that were injected into the roasting process. That's just what the coffee naturally tastes like based on what's grown, like I said, in close proximity. So if we have an idea that, hey, we want to, I'll use a couple of years ago, we decided that we wanted to feature and highlight the differences of coffee grown in Ethiopia, which happens to be the birthplace of coffee. We sourced from different farms and different co-ops in those areas, and then brought it back to our facility in Des Moines and did some test roasting, if you will. You take the green coffee and you roast it to different specifications with hopes to draw out different flavors, if you will. And so that R&D process takes a little bit of time. And then from there, when you have something that, smells and looks the way that you want it to, then it goes to cupping, which is a very much so scientific process, is what I referenced earlier, that how coffee is graded. We have our roasters and anyone else who's interested in being highly caffeinated for the day. And then there's a lot of taste testing, if you will, to compare and contrast how if a coffee should be a medium roast, or if it should be a light roast, or if it should be a dark roast. And the variance between those different roast levels are like a couple of minutes, if you will. And so that cupping process gives us the opportunity to align on how long we want to roast a particular set of beans. And then from there, it's time to shop it to different retailers if it's not just going to be an online only opportunity. So, that's the abridged version, but that R&D process is really where the decisions are made. There may be opportunity, or maybe times where a farmer says, hey, you should roast this as a light roast. But during our process, we have determined that maybe this should be a medium roast because it really accentuates certain flavors. So ultimately, there's just a lot of trial and error before we in the building come to an agreement on taking a product to market.
And that process, that iteration, do the retailers sometimes jump in the loop and give feedback and direction as well?
Not necessarily, but with our cold brew, for example, Target played a much more significant role than they would have otherwise. So Target has the desire to be a destination for coffee and a destination for cold brew coffee in particular. So they had a little bit more of a say-so in the formulation and the aesthetics of our cold brew coffee. And we absolutely welcomed that because that obviously, if they were going to be satisfied with it, that equates to distribution. So it is atypical, but if there are opportunities like that present themselves, then we can scoot over and have another seat at that R&D table.
It makes sense because you mentioned Generation Z being your friend on cold brew prepackaged.
Absolutely.
And, obviously Target prides itself in its brand on staying in line with trends.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're definitely, they have their ear to the street, if you will. And, as Generation Z continues to grow in numbers, it will behoove retailers and brands to pay attention to their interests. Fortunate for us, we have insights that we leverage to make sure that we're making the right decisions. And when we found out that, again, cold brew was the highest growing segment in coffee, those gears started to turn.
Yeah. And speaking of Target, I was on your website, so you've got a zip code finder for any folks who have not tried your coffee, but you also direct ship, right, for folks who may not have a store, and you have sort of a subscription service as well. Yes,
that was our bread and butter initially, right? When we were deciding what's our business model going to be, we chose the path of least resistance and the one that had the fewest barriers of entry, which pretty much eliminated brick and mortar, right? And not that we don't have any aspirations to have our own in-person experience, it just takes a lot to manage a a location. So our way of getting to the people and being accessible is obviously having our online store where you can set it and forget it, sign up for recurring orders, or be directed to one of our retail partners that's in close proximity to where you are.
Excellent. Is there anything you can share without giving secrets away, Rod? Is there anything you can share with our listeners on, what's next for Black and Bold?
Yeah. Well, one, it will be to have our own in-person experience. We think about our revenue channels, and we have 4 legs to that table. Right? We have our e-com, our digital experience. We have our retail partners. We have our wholesale business. So when you think about hotels, universities, cafes, restaurants, we partner with some big players in that space so that our coffee can be experienced out of the home. But we don't want to be totally reliant on that to, again, curate what that Black and Bold in-person experience will be like. So eventually, I say eventually, as in within the next, I'll call it 2 to 4 years or 3 to 5 years, we will have a few brick and mortar spaces. It won't be to the same cadence as like a Starbucks or a Dunkin', because we have just different ideas as to what that space will be used for. We want to find ways to incorporate our social impact mission, a little bit more tangibly into those spaces. So is that more of a community center? At minimum, it'll be multifaceted. They just won't be coffee shops, so to speak. So as we are still fleshing out those ideas, that is absolutely on the horizon. In addition to that, we are in the process of standing up our nonprofit foundation. So rather than just writing checks from the for-profit side of the business, we'll have a nonprofit experience that will really solidify all of our philanthropic efforts. And then lastly, we are, we'll look to reimagine what does headquarters look like, so that it is a bit more consumer facing, and we give people a reason to come visit the middle of Middle America, aka Des Moines, Iowa.
Well, I'd love to visit one of your stores when they open. I mean, it's another opportunity for you to just differentiate your branding, right? It's just because, so many coffee shops, coffee shops are great. Everybody loves a coffee shop, but they're all sort of the same, right?
Yeah. They, there's a little bit of rinse and repeat that goes on with coffee shops. In my role prior to starting this business, I did a lot of traveling and spent a lot of time in coffee shops. And to your point, they kind of all look and feel the same. And no fault to them. That just creates a lane, for those who are a little bit more innovative and creative in how they do things.
Yeah. Well, that's neat. So back to innovation, any tips you can give to our listeners who are aspiring entrepreneurs or even working for a large company doing innovation? Any tips you would give them, any stories you would tell based on your experience?
I've said this a lot, and I'm like, should I continue to die on this hill? And it's like, I just fundamentally believe this, that, there is an audience out there for you, even if you're in a crowded space like coffee, right? There are thousands or hundreds of thousands of coffee brands and coffee experiences in the U.S., let alone the world. Coffee is the second most consumed beverage in America, right? And that's behind water. So, it's not like there's any shortage of coffee brands, but we felt as though this was something that was authentic to our lives, right? Like I said, I spent a lot of time in coffee shops, and I'm positive that Purnell's blood type is caffeine, based on how much coffee and caffeine that guy drinks. So it was something that was very authentic to us, and then we attached it to a mission that we both lived and believe in and trying to eradicate. And fortunate for us, there's a tribe of people out there who wanted that level of representation. Mm-hmm. So I think that people do a disservice to their communities, to the communities that are out there that are just waiting to hear from them. So get out of your own way. Imposter syndrome is real. I get it. we did not know how to. We didn't come from entrepreneurial families. We didn't come from coffee related industries, right? We didn't grow up around farmers or serve, be baristas or anything along those lines. It was really just a matter of feeding that curiosity and that urge to take more command over the impact we were making. Right? We were satisfied with our jobs, but we wanted more, and we were able to pursue that. So anyone who has those aspirations, whether you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur in a larger organization, don't be fearful of failure, because that's a part of it, and that only strengthens and sharpens that sword as you continue to fight the good fight.
Yeah, don't just be better, be different, right? And you folks really have created something that sounds like it's really different.
I think so. And I saw a saying recently. It was something to the tune of, go deeper, not wider. And it's just like, really honing in on your craft as opposed to being a Jack or Jane of all trades. And that's what we're doing. We know our core product. We know who our core audience is. We know the demographic that we are trying to serve, and we do that. We're not trying to spread ourselves too thin. And I think those that are in our ecosystem are appreciative of us speaking directly to them.
Rod, before we go into wrap up, anything else you'd like to share with our listeners about Black and Bold Coffee?
Gosh, again, we are a coffee company that doing some cool things. Most recently, we were named in the Inc. 5000 as one of the fastest growing privately owned companies in America.
Congratulations!
And of those 5,000 brands, thank you for that. We were number 61. And they take into consideration the growth over 3 years. So for us, it was 2019 to 2022, and to be on a list is amazing. To be number 61, to be number 1 in the state, number 2 as a B Corp, top 10 in the food and beverage industry. I think that it's a testament to us answering the need that consumers had. They wanted a socially conscious brand. They wanted quality coffee. They wanted it convenient and accessible. And the fact that we're able to check off those boxes, I think, is it results in us being on that list. So we're not stopping there. Right? We have a loftier goals, and I look forward to staying on that list for as long as possible.
You've built a really neat company, and as the old saying goes, you're not just doing well, you're doing good.
Thank you for that.
I want to thank my guest today, Rod Johnson, co-founder of Black and Bold Coffee. Check it out. Go to their website, use your zip code finder, try their coffee. And, Rod, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to C2C, where we cover innovation in the food and CPG business from conception to consumption. Just type the letters CTOC, no spaces, to find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbeam, and Google Play.